If you've been following F1 for a minute, and I mean that in like the literal sense, not as in the new cool a minute being forever kind of way, you'll know that this sport loves a controversy, or a scandal, or basically anything that lets one team point the finger at the other. While fans and journalists lap up every second of the he said she said that seems to constantly exist in Formula 1, the teams are actually always on the lookout for anything they can use against each other. Sometimes the accusations ring true and one team has found that another team is using an illegal part or some kind of system which gives them an advantage. More often than not though, the accusations are completely false, just created by someone trying to get some attention or inventing things based off a single comment in an interview or maybe a completely unrelated rule change. Sometimes though, the accusations are true, but perhaps the rules haven't actually been broken, they've just been bent to the limit of legality, which at the end of the day is what Formula 1 is all about really. Red Bull are the most recent team to be caught up with accusations which were based on almost nothing. I'm George, you're watching F1 Reverse, and this is Don't At Me, the show where I get to give a piece of my mind about Formula 1. And today, that piece is on Red Bull's rear brakes, and why you probably shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet. You may, or may not, have heard a story about Red Bull using some funky, now illegal rear brake system to gain a performance advantage. It has swept through F1 social media and forums and the news outlets over the past week. The story of where these accusations came from, and what they were based on, is the perfect example of why F1 fans and the media love a scandal, even if it is rooted by the most tenuous of links. So, it all started just before the summer break. Actually, I guess it started a lot earlier than that. It started at the Australian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen and Red Bull have dominated the sport for the past year and a half, maybe a little bit longer. Verstappen has won the previous 9 races in a row, with relative ease to be honest. It's round 3 of the 2024 season, and everyone is worried that we're going to get a repeat of 2023, where Max went and won 19 of 22 races, and everyone did get a little bit bored. If Max wins the Australian Grand Prix, he matches his own record of 10 straight wins in F1. However, from lap 2, it's pretty clear that something is wrong. Instead of being 2 seconds down the road by the end of the first lap, Verstappen gets passed by Carlos Sainz, something almost unheard of at that point. Not because of Sainz, just Verstappen getting passed by anybody. Then on lap 4, his right rear brake starts smoking, and as he heads down the pit lane, the brake appears to explode, sending shrapnel all over the pit entryway. It was eventually explained as a mechanical error which caused the brake to be stuck on from the very start of the race. Whether a part failed or a mechanic did something wrong by setting it up, it was a surprising reason for a DNF, but not something completely heard of, and stranger things have definitely happened in Formula 1. Then, the next chapter of this tale was at the Chinese Grand Prix, where Max won the sprint, got pole position, and then won Sunday's Grand Prix. He was his usual dominant self, but he did have some minor complaints about the car's balance on turning, and, well, that's about all there is to that chapter. Next up was Miami. McLaren came with a huge upgrade package, and it made a massive difference to their performance. It was basically a brand new car for McLaren, while Red Bull just removed a floor edge support strut to save a little bit of weight. The amount of performance that McLaren gained against Red Bull was surprising, but not exactly impossible or extraordinary, just impressive. It was enough to earn Lando Norris a tight 4-race window. However, Max was back to his winning ways at the next race, and while their package did struggle in Monaco, Red Bull didn't look slower than before. McLaren had just gained some pace. As the season went on, McLaren and Mercedes have continued to gain performance, and Red Bull haven't been able to keep up. While it is a shock to the system not seeing Red Bull win every single race anymore, certain teams out-developing others is hardly anything to get suspicious about. In fact, if there wasn't variation in the rate that certain teams developed, then there'd be no point watching past the first race of the season because you'd already know who would have the fastest car for the rest of the year. So far in the season, Red Bull had a surprise retirement in Australia, didn't get their car perfectly set up to Max's liking in China. McLaren bought a big upgrade in Miami, then 5 races later, Max stopped winning. So that's the abridged version of the first 14 races of the season, and one of what is described as a major piece of evidence explaining why Red Bull are cheating. Apparently. So, yeah. Anyway, then we get to the summer break. At an F1 Commission meeting, a group that includes representatives from the 10 Formula 1 teams, the FIA and Formula 1 management, discuss and make decisions about the sport's regulations, calendar, and other matters. At the most recent of these meetings, just before the summer break, a change was made to the technical regulations related to braking systems. A sentence was added to Article 11.1.2. It previously read, "The brake system must be designed so that within each circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc." But added to the end of the rule was this sentence: "Any system or mechanism which can produce systematically or intentionally asymmetrical braking torques for a given axle is forbidden." Now, rule changes happen in F1 all the time. The majority of them are so specific or complex or just completely trivial that you never really hear about them. I mean, how much do you really care? I don't know, the allowable distance between the rear wheel and the bottom of the rear wing has been decreased by half a millimeter. You probably don't care at all, and if that change had happened, you probably wouldn't even notice on the cars unless someone pointed it out to you. Some changes are a bit bigger though, and this change in particular, in Article 11.1.2, is one of those. This is a rule addition which bans an entire system which the teams could potentially have been using, in this case the system which would allow you to apply more brake force to one side of an axle than another. Now, there is performance to be gained from this system, but working out a way to actually integrate it into a car, in the rules as they are before this rule change happened, was incredibly difficult. Now, if you could get this asymmetrical braking system to work, it would improve your corner entry massively, which would help rotate and balance the car, therefore gaining lap time. So there was definitely something to be gained if any team could actually work out a way of doing it. So while this isn't a completely nothing change to the rules, you would likely have never even realised it had happened or ever heard of it if it hadn't been for Peter Windsor. Now, you might know the name. Peter is an F1 YouTuber, journalist, ex-team member, and was one of the leaders of the failed US F1 team back in 2010. He has decades of experience in and around the paddock, and his YouTube channel and his Twitter often have some really interesting and insightful insights into Formula 1. But he does have a bit of a reputation for making some pretty wild claims on his YouTube channel and to his Twitter followers. Earlier this year, he said with great confidence that Alex Albon had been offered a 3-year Red Bull contract and was going to partner Verstappen in 2025. Obviously that didn't happen. Anyway, Peter tweeted saying that Red Bull were using the brake system that the FIA had just outlawed, which was why the technical regulations had been changed at the commission meeting. Now, he didn't offer any evidence for this, apart from the fact that Red Bull had a surprise retirement in Australia, didn't get their car set up perfectly to Max's liking in China, and that they then stopped winning every single race from Miami onwards. So, this one tweet, which was based on nothing but an additional sentence in the rulebook, started days of tinfoil hat conspiracy theories about Red Bull and Max Verstappen and people calling for them to be stripped of 2 years worth of championships and race wins, and all the general kind of F1 Twitter toxicity that comes with it. Now, this isn't me calling out Peter Windsor in particular, or any other personality for that matter. Respected publications like Motorsport magazine jumped on this story as well and ran with it. Some guy last week claimed that the only reason that Red Bull were keeping Sergio Perez around was because his sponsors were going to cover the money that they lose if they don't secure the Constructors' Championship. And he told everyone that that was 100% the truth, in complete confidence. But then an hour later, someone called his bluff and he deleted the tweets. But obviously the story had already done the rounds. I saw it on Reddit actually, and it had, 5,000 upvotes or something like that. The truth is, I actually kind of enjoy it when these kinds of crazy theories get thrown out, because there's a lot of fun to be had about trying to come up with reasons as to why these things are happening. And I love it when someone says something that makes you go, wow, would that actually work? Could they have done that? Kind of, how did they manage it? What would be the implications? I know whenever something like that happens, my group chat always goes off with theories, and it creates great conversation, both, between your mates and on social media, and, there's some great articles come out that you can read about this kind of stuff as well. However, when there isn't any proof that anything has happened, people need to take what is being said with a real big grain of salt, instead of taking it as gospel and calling for Red Bull to be struck of everything that they've earned in the ground effect era. That's something that seemed to happen with this story, where Peter Windsor made a tweet based off pretty much nothing apart from a rule change, and the entirety of F1 just ran with it for an entire week. So, what actually happened? Well, while mid-season technical regulation changes are uncommon, they certainly aren't unheard of. You remember the flexi plank stuff from last year, or the attempts to stop porpoising the year before? They weren't sweeping rule changes, but the technical regulations were altered. While the flexi plank rule changes stopped the teams abusing a loophole in the FIA's testing rules that they have, no one was breaking the rules by using that loophole. They were just playing in a grey area. Something that's perfectly legal and is actually the best way to victory in Formula 1. In this case though, it isn't even the case that Red Bull or anyone else were using a grey area to abuse torque braking. It just wasn't happening. The FIA have actually come out and said that no one on the grid was using this system, and they would know because they've got all of the technical specs and drawings of everyone's car. While this system would have been illegal from 2026 anyway, they've just changed the rules now to make it clearer for everybody, and to stop anyone even trying to attempt anything prior to that. According to the ever well-informed motorsport.com, or Autosport as you might know them, the teams actually requested the addition of this line themselves to make sure that no one was abusing the grey area. And anyway, while the rules have now been changed, anyone who was abusing this grey area prior to the changes can't be called out for cheating. They were simply using the opportunities given to them within the rules to the absolute maximum. And I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. That is what F1 is all about. The teams are meant to be bending the rules to the edge of breaking points, and if they aren't, then they've already lost against the competition because you know that the other 9 teams on the grid are going to be doing it. There have been absolutely no suggestions from any team or authority within F1 that a team had been using torque braking. But even if they were, good for them for finding a way to do so. So what's the point in all of this? Why have I made this video? Well, while I'm not a Red Bull or Max Verstappen fanboy, though I know that because I've defended them, someone will call me that in the comments, Red Bull didn't cheat, and even if they were using torque braking prior to this rule change, that still wasn't cheating. It's just ingenious engineering, which is what everyone loves about Formula 1. Hopefully, now you know the details about why Red Bull were being accused of cheating and why it was so ridiculous they were accused in the first place. You'll take just a little bit of a closer look next time something like this happens. I was George, this was F1 Reverse, and I'm excited to read all the comments calling me a Max Verstappen fanboy for trying to say something reasonable.